Hey, this is Sabrina Monarch of Monarch Astrology and Magic of the Spheres podcast. And in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the really dynamic astrology of August. The underpinning dynamism of it, I think, is due to the Saturn-Jupiter square, and Venus in Virgo is also coming in for a T-square with it. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So this chart is the full moon on August 19th, which is this event is enough. We'll get back to this on this channel, but it's not just a full moon, it's exactly square Uranus. So, big change breakthrough is coming through this month. Something around also, we had Vesta, priestess asteroid, connected to the new moon. It's here even more obviously at the full moon. And Vesta is a lot about devotion, right? So I think that we're going through a real shift maybe in what it is that we are devoted to. Like, what is the candle, the fire, the flame, the sacred fire that you're keeping alive in your life? But then if this wasn't enough of astrology happening, we have a Saturn-Jupiter square, which is a big deal. It's a major transit of the year. And Venus in Virgo is also right in this dynamic T-square. And then we also have Mars in the picture because there's a Mars-Jupiter conjunction that at the time of making this video is building, and it's going to be part of this T-square. So let me be real with you. As an astrologer, I'm even overwhelmed with how to forecast this because there's so much that could be said about it. So I'm attempting to give you some lay of the land and just point you to maybe what archetypally this is going to be about. So right before we get into that, I just want to make a quick announcement. Do not fast forward through this, hear me out. This Kickstarter only has 3 days left, August 8th, today, 9th, 10th, 11th, maybe that sounds like 4 days, but it ends on August 12th. Don't wait till August 12th, back August 11th if you are going to back. We're very close to hitting the $24,000 goal. We're a little over 20,000 right now with 72 backers. I'm just going to encourage you all to come out, even if you throw in a cash amount that's $5 or something like that. I want to see as many people back as possible. And I actually really think that we're going to make it. And why I think that is because I'm offering a lot of amazing things, truly. I'm offering a forecast for the year ahead, some inspired talks, one-on-one astrology readings with me, the evolutionary fusion reading at a discount, a new glamour magic course, a significant $1,000 off discount to the next evolutionary astrology intensive starting October 8th. And also you can bundle the courses. So I'm kind of looking at these last two, and I think that there's a few of you in the wings that are going to come through for this course. I'll leave the link in the notes. The Evolutionary Astrology Intensive is like my flagship signature offering. It's something that I offer to help you develop a fluency in the wisdom tradition of evolutionary astrology in an intimate, interactive container. So I will get back to the forecast now and talk about this mutable astrology of the month that you're already probably feeling. So let's begin with what Saturn-Jupiter is. I'm going to highlight Saturn-Jupiter as the main aspect of the T-square because it is the two slowest moving planets that we have as part of this big pileup. So Saturn-Jupiter contacts have a lot to do with living a good life, your morality, your ethics. It can have to do with at a global scale or in a bigger picture way. It has things to do with how society organizes, what becomes the standard Saturn philosophically, Jupiter, right? What do we believe makes a good society? What do we believe makes a good citizen? In your personal life, this can be how you're grappling with bigger, weightier questions of who you really want to be, what kind of life you want to live. But because it's happening in mutable signs, this whole dynamic of the month is rather shifty. I think we're going to see people pivoting, right? It's also Mercury retrograde right now. So people are going to say one thing and then change their mind. Those moments where you say something out loud and immediately you're like, wait, I don't think that's true now that I've said it. It's like that a little bit because the mutable signs highlight learning, right? It's like you kind of dip your toe into something, you experiment, and then through that, you pick up information, you pick up direct experience and that informs what you think and what you believe. So I think this is interesting where it's like, there is going to be something about being flexible with your worldview, maybe entertaining ideas that you would have never thought, or feel like they're kind of out of your purview or out of your preference or feel unusual to you in some way. But maybe it's like a kind of plot twist moment. I had notes, by the way, but for some reason, I really just felt like winging this one. But now that I say that, obviously, I'm going to pivot and go back to my notes. Here we are. I wanted to also highlight Mars-Saturn coming together because that's the one that is trickier. It's a planetary combination that concerns astrologers generally. Like they're the ones that are like, ooh, that's scary, and I don't think it always is. And I'll tell you why. So we have the aspects, or the two malefics aspecting, right? So you have Saturn, which is consequence, cause and effect, gravity. It has a severe quality. It relates to things like hard reality and, having the cold water splash in your face of the like reality check moment, having to deal with limitations and obstacles, and hard boundaries. And then you have Mars, which relates to will, vital life force, war, violence, strife, pain, cutting and severing, right? So when Mars and Saturn come together, you have more formidable military might, more hard-hitting experiences, and also frustrations and delay. Mars is getting, Mars wants to push on the gas pedal and Saturn is the brakes. So you have this sense of a clunkiness, maybe, of things being just difficult, chaotic, especially because they're in mutable signs. But I also, from knowing people with Mars-Saturn contacts natally, they're often athletes. They're often like people with really strong constitutions, people that can like do a lot of strenuous physical activity, like they really can endure. I also know Mars-Saturn people who really feel like winners, like they take losses. Like if you're a winner, you also lose at times. If you're in the ring, you win some, you lose some. So those can be hard hitting, either the victory or the loss. But there's like just a real sturdiness to Mars-Saturn people that I tend to notice. When it's happening as a transit, though, and it's not a familiar, if you don't have Mars-Saturn natally, it's kind of like we need to be respectful of risk, like people that do extreme sports, there is risk that goes along with it, but they typically are respectful of those risks and come well prepared. You're not cavalier in the face of these kind of things. So having a Mars-Saturn dynamic happening right now, it doesn't mean stay inside and do nothing. It just means, I think, respect the risk. But also it's Saturn in Pisces and Mars in Gemini. So it might be emotional, mental. It could be, Mars in Gemini is conjunct Jupiter. So it's also very like our mental activity is really heightened and sharp and hot right now. So it could actually be showing up as anxiety, like thinking of the worst case scenario kind of thing, because it's also Saturn bringing in the pessimism. It could be like nightmarish states, like Saturn and Pisces, having these moments where you feel this kind of hard-hitting, depressive malaise. That might not even be so bad. I've encountered those lately. And inside of them, like when I open inside of them, they've actually led to visions. They've led to a greater sense of optimism and faith and like a deeper rooted trust in life. You know, when you're kind of, you're really gripping and you're trying to force and you're trying to make things happen and you don't feel secure. You don't feel secure in life when you're doing that. And when you really like actually let that go and surrender and feel like you've accepted what is, you might open to more beyond that after it. So all of that I've just described isn't really like real world kind of stuff per se. It might be showing up as a concrete circumstance. It might be really conceptual and mental, or it might be an emotional state. And then, as I was saying, the larger and longer acting story, you have to be patient with me during this forecast, by the way, because I'm going to bounce around. I did not know how to present the information of this T-square to you in all mutable signs in a linear, ordered way. It was like, I rarely have an experience with a transit where it boggles me, like, how do I mentally organize this? But Jupiter-Saturn contexts, as I was saying, are a lot about morality and defining more our moral and ethical principles. There might be something here around how we're entertaining shortcuts, like feeling into not taking them, for example, in the sense that it's not enough to get what we want, but we want to also have esteem in how we went about it. This isn't just for our own peace of mind, but we're really kind of philosophically grappling right now with this principle that we reap what we sow. And it's not so black and white. It may actually be that what we thought was wrong or like not correct in the past might shift and we might see the value in something. So our principles might be changing. And I think that's causing insecurity for a lot of people because we're shaky as we walk. It's like, am I on the right path? Like, is this kind of experimental? Am I just out here? Like, what is reality? What's true? What's right? So if you're feeling that confusion, you're on time astrologically. There may also be some tensions here between theory and practice. Like when you have a philosophy or you have these philosophical principles, like, are they livable? Do they actually integrate and apply to your actual experiences? Then you add Venus and Virgo to the mix of all of this. And I think that there's a thing that's being worked out right now about how our relationships, whether they're relationships that you're actively in or you're calling in a new level of relationship in your life, it's something about how these cultural tensions, right, or your own moral ethical tensions, which a lot of these are culturally influenced, right? Like you are influenced by your culture, even if you're counterculture, even if you think for yourself, it's like you still have to navigate the cultural matrix. And a lot of these things are really deep rooted and unconscious and whatnot. And I think love is a really interesting arena for that because there are some cultural conventions maybe about love and relationship that may work for you, that may have really served you in your life, that may have like really kept your community together. And there may also be cultural ills or cultural issues that really stress you out, that really feel like they block you from love. Like they feel like you can't even get on the same page or communicate with people if you're just in totally different worlds or, you know, different relationships with the cultural conditioning. So how does that desire of the heart, you know, the desire to connect, interface with some of these bigger tensions that are being worked out collectively or individually in your life around what you think is true, noble, correct, right, ethical, etc. So let's again think about this in mutable signs, these dynamics. Very shifty month, right? The mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces are the most fluid of all the signs. You have the cardinals, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, which have a lot of startup burst of energy. You have the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, which have incredible endurance and staying power and stubbornness, if you will. But the mutable signs are about learning and shifting and moving and loosening things up. It's about information and data, right? Like how opening to new information, receiving new information might change your life, right? It might change how you think about things. And that can be really delightful. It can also be really inconvenient. It's also about understanding in philosophy, the mutable signs, like the Jupiter side of the mutable. It's also about magic, things like mindset, prayer, small changes making a big ripple. I think prayer is really very mutable. If you have if you have a relationship with prayer, you'll notice that different prayers have different results and that different relationships to God, right? If you're relating to God as a father, if you relate to God or the earth as like a great mother, if you relate to God as your ecstatic lover, if you relate to God as you are co-creating, like these different types of relationships and prayers that you might form, like actually create many different types of timelines. And I think at this moment, there may be some plot twists for people in terms of having like a new gnosis come through about who and what God is to you in your life, right? In all of God's multidimensionality, right? Because you could even, I mean, you can choose atheism and whatnot, but that's going to also give you a certain timeline and certain realities. So think about that. I think actually, it's an interesting one. You know, a big part of Saturn Jupiter that I should have mentioned, that now I'm like is dropping, is that you have this massive tension between expansion and contraction, right? Got to put my notes down. We got to talk about this. You have like your optimism with Jupiter, your belief that anything is possible, that like you can just see out into the distance and like you trust, you believe, right? And then you have Saturn, which is a little bit more grim and head down kind of energy. It's about contraction. It's about focusing on what's real. And so there's like this vying thing right now of like, are things possible? Are things impossible? Do I believe? Do I not believe? Do I have trust and faith in the unfolding of my life? Do I think I'm doomed? Like that friction is really alive right now. And I think that this really opens up something where it's like, notice if your relationship to optimism and faith has a lot of grip to it. I find this common within manifestation, when people misuse manifestation or project a lot of their neuroses onto it, where it's like you want something and you're gripping onto it and you're like trying to control or force it into creation, as opposed to when you really sit with the grief of something not working out or of not having belief, of having ran out of energy to believe or have faith. And what happens when you drop the force and the grip? And often there's actually something deeper that catches us. And I think it's important to develop that skill to drop and to feel what catches us, as opposed to just drop and then close and enter this kind of hardened, jaded state of like, it's over, nothing is possible, and to just stay frozen in that state. Because there's another way where it's like you actually do de-armor inside of that state and let that fall away and then feel into a deeper like universe. What is your desire and plan for me, right? How do I participate with that? But it's like really surrendering into not having the control that we think that we have. So a few things I wanted to mention though about the way that this big pileup of planets, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, Venus, are all happening in mutable signs. Part of the dynamism and challenge in our current experience is about how quickly things are pivoting and changing. Old assumptions could be breaking down in the case of new or changed information. And that can be very disruptive or inconvenient or enlivening and supportive. So think too about like Mars, Saturn coming in to really, really cut or bring some kind of harsh truth maybe into the picture, and how that can really be, If you think about like pruning a rose bush or something so that it actually grows better, that there is like a supportive, life-giving part of this malefic energy. And that in the moment, it can be really painful or disillusioning if certain things come to light, right? Or you come into awareness of truth of an unconscious pattern that really was running you and you couldn't even see it. It was a blind spot. Or you really idolize someone and then you realize that they can't hold that, that you thought they were perfect or you kind of thought they were godlike. And just those moments of being disappointed or disillusioned when another face of truth shows itself. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you have particularly rigid expectations for yourselves or for yourself or others about being consistent in a particular way or not changing your mind once you've set to something, there can be shame showing up in the form of judging the mess or chaos of the process. Like, for example, very innocent expression of like the mutable chaos of the moment. Really benign in some way, but I spent like 10 hours trying to make a traditional Greek dish called moussakas. I always feel weird saying it. I don't know if I say it right. I didn't realize from the recipe how actually hard it was. I utilized ChatGPT at the grocery store just to like get the ingredients and figure out what the fuck to do. I messed up the sauce. I was like on the phone video call with my friend Kennelly, and she was helping me like troubleshoot and make the sauce again. I gave myself like 5 hours of scheduled time in the day to make this dish, but at like 5 p.m., I just knew I was going to be in the kitchen until like 11 p.m. or midnight. Like I was knee deep in the hardest cooking experience of my life, having a great time, not stressing out too hard. But the thing is, I had a podcast interview scheduled where I was going to interview someone that I really, he was graceful. He rescheduled with me, but I just had to message him of like, can we reschedule? Like, I have gotten lost in this cooking process and I'm going to be in the kitchen for the rest of the night. Now, like, that's a little bit chaotic. Like, did I want to cancel work because I got stuck in the kitchen? Like that kind of energy, it's like I could have been in like some shame spiral or it was like judging the messiness or unprofessionalism or any of that. But it's like at the end of the day, it was a podcast interview. This can be rescheduled. If it was something that was a little bit more like a class or group something, I probably wouldn't have been endeavoring to make that dish. I thought I had the time. But while that was happening, I really was like, this is just bad time management. Like it was very mutable. Like time slipped away from me. I'm in chaos. Things didn't work out. I fucked up the sauce, had to go back to the store. Like everything's harder than I thought. And so I realized that actually, like inside of that, I was doing something that I really feel like people are doing this month, which is being a little bit flaky, perhaps, or just a little bit messy. And in a lot of scenarios, that's okay. Like it's just life, But you bring in Mars-Saturn, and it's like if you have a really strong internal punisher, like you shame yourself and judge yourself really hard, there might be moments this month where you can find some more grace inside of that because you're not perfect. You will make mistakes in this life, and something about like how do you adapt and go with the flow inside of the trial and error of having some successes and having some failures, right? And that these things could be really benign, like cooking messes and having to cancel work. I am thinking about for the Mars-Saturn, there's an influencer, I'm not going to say the names, but an influencer couple. And one of them recently just got really bad press for just like serial violence, basically. And we haven't heard from the other member of the couple. Like she's just gone silent. And it was really disillusioning for me to see I just thought that they were like a good couple. Like I feel like my heart goes out to her. It's incredibly, from what I was seeing, I don't know them. Um, but from what I saw, it seemed like there was like a really special, deep bond. And so I'm imagining her finding out like, how much did she know? How much is she totally blindsided and shocked? Like how horrible it is to just like have your best friend and partner um it come to light that there's, it's just that to me feels like a malefic Mars-Saturn mutable astrology event. Um, so you don't know with transits what scale they're going to take. All you can really do, I don't promote like astrological anxiety. All you can do is live your life, strive to really know yourself, like to have self-awareness, to strive to understand life and God, right? To live well, to pray, um, and to apply yourself in life. And then we deal with these moments of fortune and misfortune. Astrology, in some sense, tracks that. So whether the mutable chaos at the moment is really innocent and benign, or if it has, or it's just personal and psychological, or if it's like an event, you don't really know. Um, and we don't always really play God in that way. Another thing with the mutables is chaotic turns, plot twists, detours, etc. This can show up as an annoyance or an activator. How you roll with it may depend on your perspective and mindset or willingness to stay present and open inside of confusion, unknown, or inconvenience. Again, at whatever scale, if it's a small thing or if it's a really large thing, right? Sometimes people make beautiful art and develop and open spiritually and open their heart even deeper because of disappointment or heartbreak. It's amazing to watch people have these personal reinventions after a breakup. To see people grow more powerful, more creative, more open-hearted, more connected to life after they deal with something difficult. I think that's mutable energy too. It's like literally that spirit of rolling with it and adapting. A lot of the dynamism of the current moment has to do with what we think and believe. Okay, so your beliefs about God, about life, about yourself. This is something you can also, you can pray. Like if you want to, I think one of the really powerful words for prayer is remember. Like, please help me remember that my life is a celebration. Please help me remember, insert whatever it is that you want to remember, something that feels like, please help me remember my connection to all things. Help me remember what it's like to have an open heart. Like you can really restore or open a lot with these kind of memory prayers. And if you think about it too, a lot of spiritual lucidity is a process of waking up and being lucid and then falling back asleep. You must know this in your own life, right? Those times where you just like almost feel like you fell asleep at the wheel or like you got drunk or something. And you're like, how did I forget? So that's where remember and remember based prayers, I think, are really grounding inside of that like Neptunian Piscean sauce that you can get lost in. But the dynamism of the current moment has to do with what we think and believe, and perhaps the specific actions or systemic actions that we take as an extension of those thoughts and beliefs. Right? And this can be very unconscious. And there can be awakening here where it's like when you see these moments where, oh, that behavior I've had because of some childhood trauma, and that's how I've been like projecting onto all these people or onto reality itself, that this is the paradigm I live in. These are the behaviors, it's like a whole set of beliefs and actions that unfold from these unconscious beliefs. So this is where we could be experiencing breakdowns, renovations, and expansions, which might be hard in the moment, but I think is celebratory, right? It's like the bitterness and the celebration of Saturn and Jupiter coming together, where you might be disillusioned of something that wasn't very helpful for you in the first place. If you feel the presence of moral, religious, spiritual, or existential conflicts in your life and your inner being, you're probably feeling these mutable squares. And having noticeable problems tends to energize or galvanize our will to face them, to confront them, to address them. See the bad news Saturn and the good news Jupiter, all in one. So I want to go into some of this. I hope you're following me. I hope that this is helping. I hope that you're enjoying following the thread. We're going to keep going, and I'm going to talk to you about these planets in their signs specifically. So just drop it in another layer of detail. And again, I want to remind you, if you're watching this and it isn't past August 12th, and especially not past August 11th, back the Kickstarter. Please support a year ahead of free content like this. I'm offering like everything you sign up for from the Kickstarter is wonderful. There's a variety of tiers that you can back, a variety of like depth or length of experience, all the way up to a course that could change your relationship with your self-image and your enchantment to feel magical and luxurious in yourself via glamour magic, or to become fluent in evolutionary astrology, to become initiated into this language that is a really powerful lens. Like these archetypes, getting to know them for yourself opens up doors that are beyond your current imagination. If you love astrology, which you probably do because you're watching this, it's like when you know that you're ready to take that jump where you want to have the craft for yourself, that you want to speak the language, that you want to be talking to the planets and receiving gnosis from them directly. That's what I teach people how to do. It's not impossible. It's not even that hard, actually. It's just about having the right conversation. And that's what I love to do with people. That's what I love to do in these groups, is offer transmissions and create a space for the conversation where you can really grok these archetypes, see how you already know them, open up these wisdom portals through them, and start to see your life through new eyes. My students will tell me that their experience becomes a little bit psychedelic at times in the class, where they're seeing the archetypes in their life, and it's like opening their lives and blowing their minds in this way that really surprises them, because you just can't anticipate or imagine these things before. So if you're ready to go deeper into astrology, specifically evolutionary, which is a soul-based astrology, if you want to study with me, the Kickstarter is an epic opportunity to get $1,000 off the course. And so you can secure that discount through August 11th by backing it in the Kickstarter. So now I'll get back to our forecast, Saturn and Pisces, and have a sip of Greek mountain tea. Saturn and Pisces. This can be showing up in our lives. There's so many things to say about it. I have, if you research my channel or look up Saturn and Pisces, I have a whole long form video on it, but I want to highlight a few things. One is taking greater responsibility for our spirituality, magic, and relationship with spirit and God. As in, even accepting spiritual reality. I think that well, I know it sounds judgmental. I'm just going to go for it. I think that it's spiritually immature to not like acknowledge the presence of the spiritual, right? It's just like, it's like turning off a whole sight, turning off a whole layer of reality. And it's fine. You can live that way, but you're not going to be playing the spiritual game in life, like if you don't even acknowledge that layer. So I think that people listening, you know, if you think that the movement of the planets, so real quick, it's not that the planets are emitting some kind of physical chemical that's causing us, you know, entering our brains like that mechanistic material worldview. It's a synchronistic thing. It's like we just happen to live in a reality where the placement of the planets mirrors profoundly what's happening as above as below, or so above so below. As above, so below. That's it. And it's like, what is the fabric, the spiritual fabric that holds all of that? Right. So even inside of like astrological transits, right? Like if you believe in the transit, but you don't take responsibility for yourself as a participant in your life, you're going to blame the transit and not take responsibility for your part or your personal development and so on. So Saturn and Pisces, it's like, where can you be more grounded as a spiritual being who is also a human? There's something about becoming more lucid here in the ways that we are irresponsible with spirituality and magic, such as when we are willfully delusional or when we're acting out childlike complexes and ignorance, right? It's one thing if you really are awakening to something, because we go through these layers over and over again of awakening, no matter how advanced you are. It's another to be like, I see that, but whatever, I'm going to keep doing it. I'm also thinking about Peter Pan types. I think the Peter Pan thing is something that I'm going to be talking increasingly about. But it's like this condition of having spiritual power, but not grounding it into an effectual life, or playing out dysfunctional relationship patterns. So it's like this whimsicality that's carried into adulthood in like an unintegrated way. And I'm going to just call that Peter Pan energy. Right? It could be a psychic who gives non-consensual violating perspective to people who didn't ask for it. I know that's not normally like a Peter Pan vibe, but I'm just talking about like immature spirituality. Or spiritual gifts, don't automatically translate to good use. Being responsible with spiritual gifts also means being integrated with them. It also means actually like owning that you have them. Because sometimes people have this access to the spiritual, but they're just like in addiction and partying or, getting lost in their lives in some way and like ignoring the spiritual call. Because when you follow the spiritual path, it does relate to a lot of awakening and loss in life in some sense, where it's like you don't get to stay the same person. You might evolve, you might awaken in certain ways. And so part of us will really resist that. Right. So if what I'm saying is touching something in your life, around where you're being called, whether that feels really kind of good and maybe full of dignity and grace, that you're being called into this new level of maturity, right? Or if it feels like a harsher, like grow up kind of moment. Also with Saturn and Pisces, deep and necessary disillusionment. So we can disproportionately assign meaning or even ultimate meaning onto things that cannot hold it. We idolize a person or think a person is without flaws and then experience rupture in the relationship, for example. And then it hits some deep pre-verbal spot, like before you even had words, of disappointment from your caretakers or something like that. And you're just wrecked, right? And it's like, why is this experience of being ghosted or having someone not be able to repair something with me killing me inside? Like, what is this? Or we think something in our lives is going to last forever until it ends before we felt ready. And we have to accept that our previous vision of how life was going to go is not going to pan out that way. These are very painful experiences, and people can give up or shut down inside of these disillusionments. It is possible, though, to have deeper breakthroughs and come into greater acceptance, forgiveness, and celebration of life after these ruptures, right? A celebration of life as it is, as it's becoming, not as we fantasized it would be. We are tasked to forgive our grievances spiritually, like at a deeper, higher level. And you have to let your human have their process too. They don't like bypass it. And surrender, accept a larger plan or unfolding than the one that we thought we wanted. Some of the ways we kick and scream and resist all of this also makes up the delusional patternings, like God hates me or God isn't real, etc., that we can be called to surrender. Where did our distrust of life and that disconnection start? Right? And isn't it interesting, though, as a human, like as an individual being, we're working through that tension of that we separated from source to have this individual experience. And we're designed in some sense to long for that connection. But we have those two parts, soul and spirit, and then human. And such is the eros, it's like we are the merging of spirit and flesh. There's something incredibly erotic about that. And also there's such tenderness and pain and separation inside of that. And it shows up in all these little ways in our lives. In terms of, do we feel connected to the path? Do we feel connected to this life? Or do we feel like we've fallen away somehow? When did we start identifying a hero in perhaps like a misplaced way? Right? Or where is that resource, that bigger, deeper resource that life has to give us? It's Saturn, okay? We got heavy. Let's talk about Mars, Jupiter, and Gemini square Saturn and Pisces, though. So Jupiter and Gemini can represent a part of ourselves or experience at the moment where there's a call for side quests or taking a fork in the road. Like Gemini is like easily distractible and is like, what about this? What about this? What about this? Like wants to try all these different things. And Jupiter is like our understanding of life. It's like our path. And so it gets a little scattered and all over the place in Gemini. This may be purposeful, right? Like you may be actually broadening at like a horizontal level. Or it could be distracted and diffuse. So there's something about like, are we staying the course? Are we getting distracted by like a shiny object on the side of the road or the promise of relief or just something else? Or is the path about bouncing around and pollinating or what? We don't know. Jupiter and Gemini can relate to a profound gift in synthesizing information or reading symbols and signs. It also can be a challenge with just that, over-reading symbols or identifying with a belief that things are just coincidental and that things don't mean anything. I have a video about it on this channel of like this pendulum between hyper-meaning and meaninglessness that happens when people start to read omens and symbols and they get a little manic and they start to think that everything means something all the time, every animal they see, everything like, and they get into this like mania with it. And then they're like, fuck that. That was all a dream and nothing means anything. And it's like, where's the in between, right? Like that's I think the struggle that Jupiter and Gemini can have. On the flip side, it can be a very gifted symbol reader kind of vibe. In our lives at the moment, we may be in the process of experiencing some more gravity-filled moral forks in the road or greater, what am I doing with my life questions? Whether we find ourselves too bogged down on the path that we don't let ourselves explore other options and we feel stuck, or whether we're distracting ourselves with things on the side and trying to procrastinate or ignore the other thing, that deeper, quieter, maybe more boring or difficult thing that we're actually avoiding, that is calling us. We could feel like we're juggling too many things and we question which of them is correct. There may also be crises appearing in terms of finding out what the truth is and that we cannot just think and believe our way into creating our own reality all the time. That we can't just will a thought into being real. That we do largely influence our reality with our thoughts and beliefs. And this can be powerful. Mindset is powerful. Thoughts do influence even our chemical, emotional state. But I think we know the difference when we're trying to yell our affirmations out louder than the truth that's staring us in the face. It's like plugging your ears and like, la, 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 I can't hear you kind of energy. This is tricky because sometimes what we pessimistically think of as truth is negative, jaded fantasy also. So we're possibly confused at this time about what is true inside of the vying negative and positive perspectives, Jupiter-Saturn, Saturn-Jupiter. It might actually be the dramatic comparison between the two that is creating intensified internal conflict. This can also play out in relationship if you're engaging someone whose beliefs or perspectives is a major foil to your own. How are you doing? We still have a little bit more to go. We do have some space and freedom to adopt a more life-opening mindset or set of beliefs. However, using force to believe in something that's not true will not yield ultimately satisfying results. So again, like the manifestation kind of behavior of like, I see myself on a yacht in the next year that I own. I see, like that kind of energy where you're just like commanding these kind of like Geminian, like, this sounds nice. I'm going to try it on and I'm going to make it happen. And it's like actually that energy of like entertaining a light thought that's like kind of flittery and like a little mental butterfly that just makes you happy and like opens up a path is amazing. That's actually like a high part of Gemini. But I think the Jupiter Mars, it's like it could show a part of us that's really trying to rally for something kind of specific, kind of mental. And that Saturn and Pisces is like either going to animate and materialize that or say no to it. And we're dealing with that tension and friction. Because if you've ever worked toward a challenging dream, if you've ever applied yourself towards something that had some risk in it, you knew that there was a chance that it might not work out. So it's like, how do you hold that knowing and also believe? It's psychologically quite tense, And it's a spiritual process also. And some knots are really being worked out here right now. There may be some philosophical back and forth as we decipher what parts of reality are flexible enough to change with our mindset and beliefs, right? Or with our invitation of prayer, of like asking spirit, God, life to help us see more clearly, right? To remember something, to come into harmony. Like we might actually be letting our thoughts dissolve and shift a little bit. So the difference between where we have the power to create versus where there's simply a truth that we have to face. I have something in my notes I'm going to skip and summarize a little bit, but basically I wanted to say that sometimes people, what I anticipate will also be happening with this Saturn-Jupiter square is this pattern that people do sometimes where they come up to a place of like an obstacle on their path, like they decipher the demons of their path, basically, and then they find a solution, and it's like this other path, other career, other spiritual path. And then they get really righteous and they look back at their past and it was like, that was bad. Like that field, that industry was toxic. That belief was untrue. Like that, and it's like, can you give some fucking grace to the path that you were on? Like this actually really personally annoys me because I think it's black and white. I think it's reductive. That often, like if you get to a place of illumination and awakening, your path took you there. And there's something holier than thou, righteous, like simplistic to look back and just be like, that problem that I saw along the way of that path, the whole thing's bad. And I found the solution. It's this. I see that happen on people's spiritual paths when they take a deep turn in some way and they demonize their past. It happens in career fields also. It can happen with people and relationships. So I would just really encourage to think more broadly and complexly about the path when things change, when you pivot, and actually integrate the wisdom of the past as opposed to cutting yourself off from the tree of it. And then Venus in Virgo. As I mentioned earlier, Venus enters this dynamic with precision at the same time of the Jupiter-Saturn square. The larger story is always defined by those slower moving planets. So Venus is showing up as like an activator. But she's also concerned with the story. And I think it's interesting because Venus in Virgo is so refinement oriented. It's like, how can I love better? How can I be better? How can I be more skilled at love? She can get a little bit perfectionistic and cut off from receiving because of trying to manage and control and whatnot. Or it can be very critical, like not able to receive people because you're too busy seeing their demons and criticizing them and whatnot. So there are some issues and troubles with the placement, but also at its heart, it's like, how can I really be in service? Like it's an expression of like love and care through acts of service, devotion, and the willingness to improve, like the willingness to actually like editing or self-improvement is naturally squeamish because when we face our mistakes or we face what's like not ideal, not glamorous, etc., it's easy to shut down inside of that. And you can get really like inflated and deflated of like, I'm the shit, I'm the best. And then you look at yourself with a mirror in bad lighting and it's like a magnifying mirror and you're like, I'm terrible, And like, what would it be like to have spiritual neutrality, like inside of seeing your flaws or seeing other people's flaws? I think that would give Venus this month a leg up, of like, can you just be with the cringe and the discomfort of like the weird little thing that showed up in your relationship or the little anxiety that came up in you? Can you like soften and love through it? I think that Venus and Virgo interfacing with this particular transit, there might be something about how she's dealing with cultural issues, that are showing up at large, but then in the fractal, in the microcosm of the personal. I thought about this in context of gender, for example, of like just kind of classic male-female differences and how there's different moments in culture where there's maybe a stronger sense of gender norms and like a sense of even harmony within that. And then moments of gender revolt or like movements of redefining the relationships between men and women and how that creates tensions where it's like, you're not just having a romantic conflict, you might be having like a social conflict that's boiling down into the personal. This also extends to queer expressions of gender also. It's basically just like, what are the cultural norms or what are the countercultural cultural norms and how are they infiltrating your one-on-one dynamics where it's like, what's getting in the way of having that full connection, that moment of understanding, that empathy, that co-creation? What kind of cultural issue is being worked out inside of the conflict of your personal life? I think Venus is really contending with that when she comes into this T-square. And inside of that, I had to deviate from my notes. I had so much to say, so maybe I just have a different written version, and this is just different, the video. But another thing I was thinking of was that it's easy to feel victimized, I think, by cultural issues infiltrating our personal lives, because it's not just, the Pisces part, the Saturn and Pisces might go out with like, oh, I have this unconscious childhood material. It's so big. It's so oceanic. I feel powerless inside of it. Or there's this like huge social conflict that is affecting my ability to find a partner, to relate to my partner. Like it feels so, I feel like Pisces can get really victimized by there being so much. It's so big. It's such a, what's that word? Like, it's not monolith or something, but it's like a colossus. It's like there's a colossus of a spiritual conflict. And it's like, I'm so small inside of that. Or like Virgo being like, there's so many problems, or there's so many details. And there's like this deep victimization that can happen of like, I'm too precious for this world. This is too hard. I want to give up. Right. And I think that I would just encourage you to take heart inside of these transits because those moments might come up. And this would be a place of like your spiritual perspective, perhaps your worldview of like, why do you have problems? Why are you facing these tensions and these places where you're dealing with, are things even possible, or are things just the way that they are? Why have you inherited difficulties from your generations? Why do you have a tragic flaw? Right? Like all of these things, it's like, what's the point? And, I speak with a bias here because I have a spiritual worldview that's really connected to evolutionary astrology and what I teach and practice and share, that we're here as souls learning things. So everything that happens in our lives is meaningful in that way. It's how you, as I've been saying throughout this, adapt with it, roll with it, learn the lessons, integrate that path. And so I think there's something happening this month where we may be experiencing these Jupiterian moments of like, hurrah, like I figured it out. I'm like solving, I'm loosening the knots of my life. And then the Saturn moments of like, it's too hard, like it'll never happen, I can't, and like getting all like drunk and in these like emotional stupors and these states, right? And that kind of back and forth, it's really quite dramatic, actually, the way that I'm talking about it now. But I think like if you really sit with yourself inside of that chaos and find some of those still points, find those openings to have a change in perspective or an awakening inside of it, I think it's how can you meaningfully move through the grief that needs to be felt, accept what is? How can you meaningfully open up to possibility during this time? And what else do I want to say about it? Let me check my notes one last time. Oh, it's what if our vision of ourselves in reality is not only allowed, but likely to change this month? So thank you for bearing with me on a more all over the place forecast than I tend to give. I really hope you received something from it. Let me know in the comments what that was, what stirred something in you, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're noticing. And please back my Kickstarter. We're really close to the finish line, and I really think we're going to make it, actually. But I've been on my own ride of pessimism and optimism about it. But we're here at the finish line, and I'm going for it. I think that we've got it. And if you love this channel, just please put something in the tip jar and claim something for yourself in the process. Thank you so much for watching. Like this video, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you again soon.